Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today we're discussing Ursula Creed's meeting with the Lord Commander Roboute Guillliman. Spoiler warning to begin, as the events we're discussing today are from the Warhammer 40k novel Creed Ashes of Cadia by author Jude Reid. As always, I really recommend you read the stories for yourself first without spoilers, as that's the best way to enjoy the lore for yourself. And with that said, let's just jump straight in. So Ursula Creed is a bit of an interesting character, seemingly arising out of nowhere, striding forth from the ashes of Cadia to assume her fallen father's position of Lord Castellan. There really wasn't too much else known of this famous daughter, adorned in her father's iconic long coat. She became the new symbol of Cadian defiance. However, that wasn't until the novel Creed Ashes of Cadia really dived in and explored the makeup of this character, unveiling her motivations and history, actually showing us far from a loving relationship with her fallen father. She had no relationship with him whatsoever, save their ties of blood. Creed was as distant to her as every other Cadian. And in fact, that spurnment, if you will, resulted in Ursula perhaps being the only Cadian who didn't worship her father. Sure, she respected the achievements he accomplished, but how could she care or love a man that was no father to her at all? The simple fact is, she didn't, and as such wanted to carve her own legacy away from his, not even taking his last name. Yet the journey for that to change began when Ursula received a mysterious set of orders. With the arrival of the fleet Primus vessel, the Omnia Paratus, Ursula was personally delivered a sealed message directed to the Lord Castellan of Cadia. It read simply, "You are hereby instructed to take immediate warp passage on His Imperial Majesty's void ship, the Omnia Paratus. Destination classified. Further orders will follow on your arrival." Now, you may think the Lord Castellan of Cadia has the right to more information or downright respect in receiving blunt orders such as this. That maybe she'd be right to tear up the parchment and throw it away. She has battles and campaigns to run, worlds and lives to save. If the powers that be have something else they would like her to do, the least they could do is have the decency to tell her what it is. But there's a couple of things that make that an impossibility, that gave away the import of the message, the lack of choice that she truly had. The first was the captain of the vessel waiting to deliver the parchment himself, the second she boarded the Paratus. The second was the blue wax seal upon the scroll, the symbol of the Ultramarines upon it. And finally, the signature of the sender once she opened the scroll, the large simple letter R. The identity quite clearly of only one possible sender in the galaxy, the Lord Commander himself, Roboute Guillliman. And well, thus obviously, Ursula Creed went. Now, she didn't know why the Lord Commander had summoned her, and she feared it meant the end of her commission, being stripped of her title as Castellan. Worse still, perhaps the end of Cadia as an effective fighting force under her stewardship. Though Cadia had fallen decades earlier, its people still put up fierce resistance against the forces of chaos, keeping that dream of Cadia stands alive. Was Guilliman to finally disperse the remnants of Cadia throughout the galaxy and the Militarum entirely, eradicating what remained of its famous regiments? It certainly seemed possible given Cadia's plight. Yet all of those thoughts within her mind dispersed when she laid eyes on the Primarch for the first time. The serf opened the door and bowed. "I present to you the Lord Castellan of Cadia." Ursula took a step inside. The chamber was dark, with a huge table in the centre, lit by a scattering of freestanding braziers that cast as much shadow as they did light. A towering figure in blue and gold power armour sat at the head of the table. Firelight glinted on the laurel crown around his forehead, highlighting his aquiline profile and deep-set blue eyes. She had never seen him in the flesh before, but there was no doubt in her mind that she was in the presence of the Lord Regent Roboute Guillliman himself. "Lord Castellan, be welcome." Ursula had expected his words to come as a deafening thunder, but when the sound arrived, it was different. A soft, deep rumble that she felt in her chest, as much as heard with her ears. She knew his face from 1,000 devotional picts, but no portrait could do the man justice. There was something about the ancient warrior that transcended mere humanity. He was full of a terrible beauty that promised inspiration and devastation in equal measure. This here is the real tiny fact and detail I love. That Ursula knew Guilliman's face long before ever seeing him. That, let's be honest here, most people in the entire Imperium know his face. If not for artistic renderings of the Primarchs across the galaxy, but because of the 1,000 upon thousands of vid captures of him dispersed across the galaxy upon his return. That the propaganda machine of the Imperium was, you could argue, just as effective as Guilliman's crusade themselves. Okay, that may be a little extreme, but the mere knowledge of a Primarch alive, a son of the Emperor returned, a miracle of salvation transpired, that would have fired and ignited faith and resistance like nothing else, especially in the time of darkness it arrived in. And Creed here, fully aware of what the Lord Commander looks like long before meeting him, from all those vid captures, shows exactly how effective that use of propaganda was by the Imperium. How the face of Roboute Guillliman has become seared and burned into the people's minds. In many ways, it's Guilliman who is the face of the Imperium now, not the Emperor. And that's not a bad thing, because obviously the Emperor couldn't be, save for the murals of the Ecclesiarchy. So in actual fact, Guilliman's return has aided the Imperium in far more subtle ways than him simply leading the war. And yet, for all of that, in spite of viewing Guilliman in those thousands of vid captures, it still doesn't prepare Ursula Creed, the war-embattled Castellan of Cadia, from meeting the Primarch in the flesh. A bit like us being celebrity starstruck maybe, only here magnified exponentially, meeting a literal demigod. Ursula had expected his words to come as a deafening thunder, but when the sound arrived it was different. A soft, deep rumble that she felt in her chest as much as she heard with her ears. She knew his face from 1,000 devotional picts, but no portrait could do the man justice. In this one small passage, it perfectly showcases the natural human assumptions, expectations we all make in our own minds, and yet how it just can't prepare you. Here expecting the booming voice of a god, unexpecting the man he is, unprepared for the Primarch he was made to be. He was full of a terrible beauty that promised inspiration and devastation in equal measure. Was there ever a better line to describe a Primarch than that? "Please enter," the Lord Regent said. Ursula stepped forward, suddenly aware that she had been gulping senselessly on the threshold. One of the seated figures raised a checking hand, A middle-aged man wearing an elaborate black and gold frock coat, his long dark hair upswept in an elaborate chignon and topped with a miniature void ship. We don't need the retinue, I don't think. The man's voice was languid. The serfs can attend to their needs elsewhere. I was under the impression that my staff were also welcome. She didn't recognize the man, but from his manner and fashion sense, he had to be one of the rogue traders who had committed their fleets to the Regent's Great Crusade. Lord Guilliman inclined his head. I leave that decision in your hands, Lord Castellan. The rogue trader visibly bristled. As you command, Lord Regent. But I would urge the Lord Castellan to consider that the matters which he has been called here to discuss are of the gravest importance. To set foot upon this vessel is to invite the attention of our enemies, and we have enemies within and without. You may have no doubt of that. The image of the burning eye from the warp dream flooded Ursula's mind. If any of my retinue have concerns regarding their personal safety, they are at liberty to leave. No one moved, not even Fletz. Excellent. My Lord Regent, I am at your disposal. The Primarch rose to his feet. Seated, he had been tall, but on his feet, the size of him defied logic. He might look human, but she was acutely aware that he and his brethren were nothing of the kind. She had seen the Astartes fight often enough to know how that veneer of humanity slipped away when confronted with the enemy, leaving only the devastating weapon the God Emperor had created them to be. A shiver passed across her skin at the thought of how Guilliman would look in anger. She doubted there were many who had seen that sight and lived. And there's the inescapable truth of a Primarch, the reason of his creation: to wage war. To wage war like no other could. To lead an entire species across the galaxy on one glorious crusade, bringing death and devastation to any who opposed. One of only 20 beings that could. 20 brothers in existence. The ultimate of the Emperor's creations. 20 weapons of unparalleled war. In the space of a few short moments, you see the man of Guilliman offering the Castellan the choice of allowing her retinue to remain or not, in spite of chastising the rogue trader. The very human aspect of him, that regal ruler of Ultramar. And then simply by him standing, the illusion of humanity is shattered. The reality of what he is, undeniable. He might look human, but she was acutely aware that he and his brethren were nothing of the kind. Again, a great little piece of reference to the dual nature of the Primarchs. How truly alone Guilliman was without his brothers. How for all his apparent humanity, none, not the Astartes, not the commanders within the Militarum, not the priests of the Ecclesiarchy, or even the High Lords of Terror, could ever view Guilliman with any true sense of kinship. At least now the lion's back, regardless of anything and everything else, Guilliman will have that. Now their meeting would continue with the reason for Ursula's presence revealed. Despite Cadia Prime having been destroyed by the forces of Abaddon, a large portion of the world had somehow survived. And it was believed her father, the previous Lord Castellan and military legend Ursula Creed, had sealed away a secret weapon, something that may be able to turn the tide of the war, if still undiscovered. The chances of any survivors was incredibly unlikely after several decades. However, Creed's weapon still being sealed away and undiscovered, well, that was possible. Now, it was Ursula herself who accurately stated that it's a mission far more suited to the Adeptus Astartes, that they would have a far more higher chance of success, of survival, than her. Yet, in another reference to the masterful propaganda ability of the Imperium, it's revealed that she's the preferred option, due to her name. The value, a creed, once more walking upon Cadia represented. That would be a symbol of defiance that could be sent Imperium-wide. And you can certainly see the logic there. Cadia, the world famously lost to the ruinous powers, shown to be still fighting, perhaps misleading the wider Imperium into believing the Imperium was pushing the forces of chaos back to the Eye. And I also think it reveals Guilliman's true thoughts on the matter. For surely if he felt there was a weapon of such importance, that whatever Creed's secret was, that it could turn the tide of the war, then he would surely instead choose a force that represented the highest chance of success. Indeed Astartes, not Militarum. Or perhaps it simply reveals how highly Guilliman recognises the value of propaganda, that he's willing to risk failure for the benefit the propaganda would bring. A creed to be seen walking on Cadia once again, far more beneficial than any single weapon could be. But regardless, Ursula would retire in private to make her decision, extremely unwilling to assume her estranged and fallen father's mantle, his legacy. And though not outright stated, it would appear she's set to decline the Lord Commander's request, and informs Captain Ajax that she's ready to meet the Lord Commander and the others once again. Yet rather than Captain Ajax returning to escort her to the meeting room when the doors open, she would be stunned to find herself looking up into the face of Guilliman, as the Lord Commander had come to her alone. And we get undoubtedly the best glimpse yet of why it was Roboute Guillliman who was the best Primarch to return to this darkened galaxy. Lord Regent, I am honoured beyond measure by your offer. A moment please before you continue. Guilliman walked past her to the centre of the room and stood beneath the dome. You are aware of the name of this vessel. Ursula blinked. The Chamberlain Tarasha, my lord. Indeed. His bright eyes turned to the stars overhead. Tarasha Uton was seneschal to the Consul of Macragge some 10,000 years ago. Her name is written in countless histories, but of those who knew her in person, only I remain. 10,000 years, an unimaginable span of time, but he spoke of it as easily as if it were days or weeks. What would it be like to remember these distant times with such clarity? To have outlived family, lovers, friends, all lost in 10 millennia of stolen years. It was under her tutelage that I grew to adulthood. She and my foster father taught me that which is required of a noble of Macragge: diplomacy, leadership, the arts of war. I was an adept pupil. There was no boastfulness in his words, merely the serene declaration of an unassailable truth. I was a grown man by the time my father came to claim me. It would be a lie to say I did not entertain some doubts as to my suitability for the role ordained for me. Guilliman's eyes were still fixed on the stars. Ursula studied the planes of his face, features of such classical perfection that they might have been wrought in marble. It was strange to think that he had ever known a moment's doubt. He turned and met her gaze, and it took all her considerable willpower to not look away. I tell you this not to counsel you to any course of action. I tell you this because I understand what it is to feel the burden of a father's legacy. It is not always easy to be what the Imperium requires of us. A frown flickered across his face, all the more so in these difficult times. And it's these kind of moments that just typify why I love Guilliman. You can so easily see the same man who returned to this galaxy as we saw in the Dark Imperium trilogy here. The same sense of responsibility, weight of the human race on his shoulders, and that longing to the days of the past, the light of the Great Crusade. Sometimes you get slightly different takes on characters by different authors. Yet here, this is spot on, feeling every inch the same man. The admission of his doubts. It would be a lie to say I did not entertain some doubts as to my suitability for the role offered me. His eyes fixed on the stars, knowing it's to that past his mind is reaching. That ancient history that only he truly knows, that only he can miss, knowing what the Imperium has truly lost. And then the subtle hint that even he struggles and feels the burden of his position. I tell you this because I understand what it is to feel the burden of a father's legacy. It is not always easy to be what the Imperium requires of us. In the same breath, Guilliman sympathizes with Ursula, and yet reminds her of her duty, in one fell stroke. I carry the weight of humanity's survival. I have to live up to the Emperor of mankind, and if I can do that, you can live up to your father. It's absolutely masterful, as we saw previously how quickly Guilliman's image could cross over from man to Primarch. Here, through his words, his compassion and understanding, he is able to traverse right back, while still standing there as the demigod before her, the returned Primarch, the Lord Commander of the Imperium. Ah man, it's moments like this which are why I love Guilliman. As I always say, why I love the lore so much. You just can't get this anywhere else. This is why 40k is the best universe out there. Because for all its grim darkness, it's these moments of light that just reach out and grab you. Absolutely brilliant. This is why it had to be Guilliman who returned first. The perfect blend of commander, statesman, and man. One who, thanks to his upbringing on Macragge, understood what it meant to be human. Who could understand the mortal concerns, perhaps more than any of his brothers. Yet always knew that duty must come first. That without it, there would be no Imperium to save. That's why he continues now, despite his own burdens. And make no mistake, why he personally came to see Ursula for herself in private, accurately judging her character, why he delivered the words he did to her here, to ensure she made the correct decision. Because that's what duty the Imperium demanded. To agree to the mission, which of course she did. But as always everyone, what do you think? Like me, do you see this as the perfect example of why it had to be Guilliman who returned first? Why it was more than just his logistics and tactical mind that make him the perfect fit? How he was immediately able to identify the concerns that Ursula had, the weight of her father's legacy, and provide the words needed to ensure she made the correct decision, by revealing even he feels the burden of his father. And is this meeting the perfect example of how propaganda is an extremely valuable tool for the Imperium. The widespread pictures of Guilliman's return that had flooded out across the galaxy, burning his image into the minds of the people. And how, again, by having the image of a Creed returned to the ruins of Cadia, the Imperium looks to capitalise on it once again. Is the propaganda war against chaos becoming more and more important? Do you think we could see something similar when the Lion's return reaches Sanctus? Despite his very different personality, do you think El Johnson's return and image will be flooded out across the galaxy? Is this the key to the Imperium's victory? The battle for faith, for morale? As always, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.